That is why you are being fed nonsense, one after the other. That is a strategy so that you forget your power.
Yes.
That was probably created in a PR firm somewhere. I'm telling you, I came from the dark side. I'm here to tell you how we used to do it. Wow. My goodness. This is what happens when you invite your whole family to
Some of you know Mory, and if you don't know her, she is a portal to the higher self. That is who she is. I thought we'd get started by explaining your path from crisis management, where you're working with corporations and urgent decisions, to becoming a higher self facilitator.
Crisis for me was my life. I was born into crisis. I was born to two parents who had fled the Iranian Revolution. My mom was thousands of miles away from her family. She had had a baby in a place that she didn't even really speak the language, and so decided when I was an infant to take me back to Iran. And we got stuck there for 1.5 years when the Iran-Iraq War broke out. From there, it just continued, that theme of crisis in my life, of chaos, of coming back to the States and my parents divorcing and my mom raising 2 girls as a single parent and watching the pain and the struggle and the difficulty. And so crisis was something that was so normal to me. It was like that was what was comfortable. So I found myself throwing myself into a career of crisis management and feeling like, oh, I'm the calm in the storm here because this is so normal. Like it's almost like when it's peaceful, it scares me because chaos is such a part of my life. But it really wasn't until I faced my own crisis where the life I had constructed out of an image of what I thought good looked like, out of assimilating to, as a woman of color, white culture, out of assimilating to corporate culture that tells you have to compete, you have to look at the other person like, there's scarcity and that you can't both have it. I was good at my job. I got promoted 8 times by the time I was 35. I knew how to play that game, and I had constructed a life out of that game. And when it all came to pass, all of a sudden it was like, oh, but you're not fulfilled and you're not satisfied. And I had 2 very, very little babies who are not little anymore. And I was in a marriage that wasn't serving my higher self. And it all just sort of came crashing down. And it was like 8 months pregnant on the floor of our kitchen, sobbing. And I just heard this clear voice. And it was so familiar. And it was just like, you know what to do. You know what to do. And I started to listen. And the more I listened, the louder it became. And the more I listened, the more life started to change. And I'm not saying it was all like snap, love and light, easy, but it just started to, I describe it as like, I was like this, I was clenched, and it was like this like expansion. It was like when something starts to unfurl itself. And life began to expand from that place. And so higher self is really about me saying, look, guys, I know exactly how this works. I know how to have trust and faith in this voice in the darkest moments. And if I can do it, you can do it. So let me show you what I did, not only for myself, but in those moments of crisis with those clients. And the other thing I'll say is when I really stopped to examine, well, how did this all work in my own life? Okay, well, you were listening to this other part of yourself, right? Well, what is that language? That's intuition. That's trusting your intuitive sensing and your knowing. And when I looked at what I did for a living for 2 decades, I realized, oh, that's what I was using. That's how I knew what to do in those moments where everybody else was so afraid. But the reason that I could hear it so clearly is I didn't have my own fear. It was someone else's crisis. So it's so much easier, right? Like when someone else is in crisis, think about a friend or a loved one, you just know the answer for them. The reason that they can't hear it is because fear is so loud. And so I started to get curious about fear and why does fear create this white noise and what's the relationship between fear and your intuition? And this method was born from that curiosity. And I left that crisis management career that was truly killing my soul because I was writing words for people to say that they didn't mean. I was writing words for people to say to inspire trust when they didn't even trust themselves. And that was eating away at me. And so I built this method from that curiosity, from my own life experience, and I started coaching people and watching these transformations happen. And alongside, my own life was transforming. Like, categorically, I live a different life completely than I used to. And so I was like, well, write it down. Damn, you have something there to tell people. So it's really about democratizing all of that and handing that gift over to you all and saying, this is the roadmap.
You left corporate America at the top. What was it like for your colleagues to have you make that decision?
I'm still pondering that question because I've had a lot of amazing things happen since. Yes. This book being one of them, the amazing people I get to coach, the people who support me publicly. And I don't get a lot of support from those colleagues. And I wonder about that. And I always think, like, what is it? Like, I really poured my heart and soul into being your colleague. And I think what I realize is it's really hard when someone wakes up to the truth that you've been trying not to see, and they leave you behind. And they leave you in that contracted place, which is what our agency was and still is, and goes and lives something totally different than what you can even conceptualize. You know, we're all human. I think it like brings about feelings of shame, of smallness. Oh God, it's really hard to look at yourself when you're looking at me doing this thing. It's hard to live in that contraction when you watch someone in their expansion.
And in your book, you really beautifully talk about limited beliefs and how many of us, and I've done this, have been in jobs or relationships where we are contracted and we are smaller, but we make up a lot of stories on why we have to stay.
Yeah.
I thought you could talk about that.
You know, limiting beliefs are a big part of the first part of this book because, as I said, I didn't want to write a book that told you, just go be your higher self. Like, it's just easy. I wanted to, I feel like I'm walking alongside you. That's the kind of teacher and guide that I am. It's like I've been in the muck, so I know what it's like to be paralyzed by fear. And so when you think about that fear, what is it really? To me, it's just, think about like all of those moments in your life as a child where life was painful. And in those moments, in order to like wrap your little brain around what was happening, you created a belief about yourself that's so contracted because you need to survive. So you're like, you're contracting yourself. Limiting beliefs are those beliefs that you create when you're 5 and that person doesn't pay attention to you, or you're 14 and they're not nice to you at school, or whatever it is, like whatever you believe, I'm not enough, I'm too much. Those are the 2 most common beliefs we all hold. Those parts of us, they don't go away. Those littles, I always say, like, listen to your littles, love your littles, because they're still there. And when you're not aware of them, they are trying to drive the car of your life. They're in the ones that are in that corporate job. They're the ones that are in that marriage, but they can't even see over the steering wheel. Like, that's what it's like to use those strategies to live your life right now. But when you're able to see that, oh, I'm having a belief that is literally limiting me. It's telling me I can't, or I shouldn't, or I don't have what it takes, or it's too scary, don't look at it. When you have that belief, I tell people, like, my sister's a somatic coach, and she's taught me a lot about how you feel these things in your body. You really do contract. You feel the contraction. So when you're in that limiting belief, like, you'll feel the heaviness. That is your younger self. And the best thing that you can do is look at it like that. Because the minute you think, oh, this is a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old, I tell my clients all the time, would you talk to your daughter that way? Would you talk to your little sister that way? Like, think about those aspects of you are always there with you, and they're trying to help you survive. So those are your limiting beliefs. And I believe the problem is when we look at modern day healing, we get too toxically positive about how those parts of us don't exist. And so what we want to do is just be like, nope, I don't want to admit that I have envy or shame or guilt or that I think I'm not enough. I'm just going to be totally all love all the time. I'm emanating love and light and positivity. That's not sustainable because it's not actually real. So when we are able to notice our limiting beliefs, what it's like, what I say in this book is like, you're taking your arm and you're putting it around all those little selves and you're saying, I got you. I know. You're just trying to help me survive. And the minute you do that, they can quiet down because their whole job is to keep you alive. But the minute you notice them and you say, I know you're just trying to keep me alive, then that noise that they create quiets down, and guess what's opening up on this side? Your higher self, this frequency that is so in its knowing. Like you know what to do when that noise isn't there.
I want you to define what is the higher self in the way you define it, and how does a person know when they're in touch with that or not?
I mean, I think I could ask you all what your higher self is, and you would be able to tell me. It's the you think about when you feel the most centered and confident. Think about a person who makes you feel that way. Deeply safe, grounded, and like confident. Like you are allowed to take up space, and that is celebrated. That's your higher self. It is you in all of your dignity, meaning that you fully understand your worth. You don't need someone else to tell you you're worthy. It just knows. Your higher self is in its dignity, fully clear and wise, has the information here to know what to do next. Now, people will ask me, is this a spiritual concept? For me, it is, but it doesn't have to be. What matters is that it's a frequency that you're vibrating that's not small, but that's expanded and that understands dignity, centered, and intuitive wisdom. When you're in that embodiment, that is your higher self, and then things open up. Possibilities begin to emerge from that embodiment.
Now talk about the white noise and how it cuts us off from our higher self.
So, literally, I do this with my clients all the time when they're talking about something that is a fear thought. That's white noise. But what you can do is literally imagine that that white noise is coming from a classroom full of children. All of your little selves, all of their little projections. This is dangerous because they're not gonna like us if we're too confident. They're not gonna think it's funny if we're weird. They're, right? Like all of those little thoughts, that's the white noise right there. And what they're trying to do is get you not to do the thing maybe, or do it a little less, or don't take as big of a leap. It's a smaller step they want you to take, if at all, right? That's the white noise. And so what happens is 100 times a day, when you're trying to make a decision, this frazzled, frenetic thing over here, lovely little ones, are so loud that they draw our attention towards them. And that's who we listen to most often because we're trying to soothe them. And we think the best way to soothe that anxiety is to do what it's telling us to do. React, send the email, send the text, call the person, because you need to feel better. Feel better now, because they're little. That's what they want. That's the white noise.
Well, what I'm aware of is when I'm in my higher self, it's a very soft and open and receptive place. Mm-hmm. And I'd like you to talk about what it's like to be cultivating your higher self and then to be around people that are occupying fear.
Yes.
And how do you manage that?
I think relationships are one of the biggest reasons we can't or don't embody our higher selves. Because what happens is that we mistake any kind of relationship as a Band-Aid to our wounds. Like instead of really trying to fill what's happening in here, the lack, we think that the other person is gonna fill that lack for us. You know, when you get into a relationship under those conditions, you've actually subconsciously agreed to stay small together because you're needing the other person to feel whole. But what happens is when you wake up to your higher self, and the truth of your higher self is you don't need anyone to be whole. You are fully whole in your existence. We can experience tears in those relationships. And part of the reason I've seen a lot of the people in my life, and I did this myself in relationships, out of a need for safety and love, is that we think if I am in this embodiment of total dignity, of confidence, of saying no when I want to say no, and yes when I want to say yes, that this person won't be able to stand it. It won't feel good to them, or I'll make them uncomfortable, or I'll make them unhappy. And so I think sometimes we even know what our higher self is, and we stay small to stay with. What that does is it drains both of you of your life force, because you are in this contraction, and what you're saying to the other person is, I don't believe you're strong enough to hold me at my greatest. I believe you're too weak for me in my most expanded form. So I'm going to play it small because I think that you're small. But when you rise to this frequency, what you're saying is, this is who I am, and I choose to be alongside you, which means I know that you can be here too. You can come to this place as well. Sometimes they can meet you there, and sometimes they cannot. And I've had plenty of heartbreak in my life where the answer was, they just can't get there. And there's no amount of fixing and people pleasing and loving that's gonna push someone up to that frequency. One of my biggest heartbreaks in life is that I can see someone's higher self first. That's who I meet. Why is that a heartbreak? Because if they refuse to see it, then you're chasing an illusion. They are never going to embody that. So the greatest thing you can do is be in your frequency of dignity and clarity and knowing, because it inspires others to know that it's possible and to meet you there, or to go away so that you can continue to add to the collective life force by being in your best, highest frequency.
So that reminds me of this incredible part in the book of Mory's grandmother, who seemed to emanate the higher self in the worst of conditions. So I want you to just share with them a story about her, because that's your inheritance.
Yeah, so my Aziz June, we called her Aziz June, it means dear one, is my mom's mom. And I didn't grow up with my Aziz June because she lived in Iran and I lived in the States. And, I was with her when I was 1, but obviously don't remember that. And the first time I met her, I was around 10. And my instant reaction to her was just to be a total a-hole, because I had my mom's full attention. She was a single mom. My sister's 9 years older. She was out of the house. It was just me and mom. And my grandma showed up, and my grandmother and my mom are like how me and my mom are. And I had such a hard time with the fact that I had to share my mom. And this woman just kept loving me, just kept smiling, just kept cooking these amazing meals for me, even when I'd be like, I don't want that. Trying to pack my lunch, trying to get on my level. I remember I got a belly piercing at 16. My mom's like, I'm gonna murder you. And I didn't tell her, and I told my grandmother, and she would help me clean it. So she was trying to hang with me. Yeah. And when I would start to get curious about her, I'd listen to these stories she'd tell of being born in a village in Iran, in the 20s, at a time when girls didn't get birth certificates. That's how much they didn't value her life. Growing up without a mother who had died right when she was a baby, being married off at the age of 12, and she would smile. And I would think, are you delusional? I don't understand what's so funny about this. But my grandmother found the love in every single part of her life. And because she just genuinely, she wasn't talking-ish, she meant it, everyone around her would transform into this highest version of themselves. Truly, you watched people just become their best selves. It was like magic. And she continued this interest in me. And even when I would pull away, she just was there. And, I write about this in the book, but she passed away when I was 25. My mom took her back to Tehran because the cancer had spread through her body, and they wanted to make sure she died in her homeland. And my mom told me after she passed that my mom was laying with her, holding her hand, praying, talking. My grandmother was just talking. And she said the last thing she said is, God, please keep Mory. Oh. And I remember my mom saying that and feeling crushed by that. I did not deserve that those were the last words she said. I never met her there. And through this work, through understanding my own intuition, through working with amazing mentors, and feeling her spirit, I feel her with me all the time. I wear her jewelry. My grandmother saw that I had the gift that she had, that I could see people's higher self. and that I was going to remind people of their inherent worth by loving them. And she sort of took this light and was like, go carry this forward. And that's my purpose. It's in my lineage. It's her. It's this intense amount of dignified, joyful love.
I happen to know your husband very well, TJ, and I know that you're parenting 4 teenagers. And I also really admire your marriage. And I think in part it's because you're both committed to higher self. And I thought you could share, because you're in the weeds also, you're just humans, but how do you stay on track with each other with that commitment?
What we've always promised each other is that we're here to facilitate the other's fullest expression. And that the minute that we become an impediment to that, we would go away. That's what love is to want the other person to be in their most expansive self. And what that means for us is a fiercely independent relationship. We were long distance across the country for 7 years. Our first year of marriage, I lived in Maryland, he lived in California. And what it means is like, he's not my possession and I'm not his. We exist and we grow alongside one another. We celebrate each other's wins, and we have the courage to say things like, I'm feeling really insecure right now because you're doing this great thing and I'm not. You know, rather than that resentment and that whatever bubbles up inside, what that means to us honoring each other is this like radical honesty where you say the things that are embarrassing to say, where you admit the things that are hard to admit, where you say, I might start going in a direction where it might not make sense for you to come with. And that's okay, because I want you to fly. I don't want to be holding onto your wings so that you can be mine.
So let's get into the political. You've really made a career out of facilitating higher self for some pretty wild outsiders and people that have been faced with incredible prejudice, bigotry, and oppression. And I'm wanting to understand more about why that's your sweet spot, at least for now.
I always tell people, if you want to get to know your higher self better, really think about what you value. That is the character traits of your higher self. And so what I value most is freedom. I had my mom write the word freedom in Farsi, and I tattooed it on the back of my neck, and she even let me do it, even though she hates tattoos. Because I believe that the best way that our souls can experience this human, tangible experience is to be free to do that. And so I think that because I come from a culture where women, not culture, but the government that women live under in Iran does not allow women to be free, I am particularly sensitive to groups of people who are not allowed to be in their truth, who are in harm's way by existing in their truth. And I'm particularly inspired by those people. I coach a lot of people, trans and queer and people in the LGBTQ plus community, because I want them to know, like, this way that you're existing in your truth, that is a higher frequency that we all need to look to. And I want to be at your back, because the world is telling you to go away because they're afraid of you. They're afraid of you because they're afraid of themselves. They're afraid of truth right now because they don't want to face their own truth. Because looking inside is so terrifying. There is so much shame. There is so much hatred of self that has happened over time, that has been masked by accumulation of power and wealth and whatever it might be, that watching you be in your truth is dangerous, because suddenly what I've accumulated means nothing, because I can't exist in my truth. And so they are the enemy because they exist in a way that forces this self-reflection that I think a lot of people can't do. So I am committed to supporting anyone who exists in a community that has ever been oppressed, because their freedom is our freedom. And we have to all be free. If we value freedom, it does not exist if anyone is not free.
It takes a lot to stand up for people that are being attacked.
Absolutely.
And you do that.
And we all need to do that. Make no mistake. Right now, certain people are being ostracized, but that is a slippery slope. And I tell people all the time, I mean, my parents left a country where when I look at pictures of my mom in her 20s and her little mini skirts in Iran, I think like, whoa, that society just went boom so fast. And you think that that can't happen here or that can't happen in other places. That happens like this because we forget each other's humanity. Because we've been convinced, by the way, as a former crisis manager, I can tell you, I can see when a crisis is being triggered on purpose. I can see when you are being triggered into fear on purpose. Why is it helpful for you to be afraid? So that you forget your power. That is why you are being fed nonsense and terrifying things, one after the other. That is a strategy. That was probably created in a PR firm somewhere. But like, I'm telling you, I came from the dark side. I'm here to tell you how we used to do it. So when fear is being triggered, the most important thing for you to do is to say, I'm not going to give you access to those littles. All of those selves that I just understood are my little selves that are afraid. If I'm letting you make me feel fear, I'm giving you access to those littles. So I'm going to stand fiercely in front of them, but let's do that for each other too. Let's do that for those that don't have the voice, the platform, the privilege we have. Because if we don't do that for each other, it's a slippery slope, and history has shown us that over and over and over.
I want to ask you, how do you resource? Because you have a big schedule, you run this company, you've got 4 children, you have an enormous family that all comes at once. How do you do it?
I think it's because of this family that I know how to resource. You know, I was asked the other day in an interview, like, tell us about this book, and I said, this book is a love letter to this family. To these amazing human beings that are sitting here that you'll read about, I've written about all of them, who kept showing up no matter how under-resourced they were, you know, who kept just being there, who kept showing up in joy. I mean, my family dances. We were just dancing last night in my house. Like, that is the way that we resource ourselves, is through joy and through love. And we've been together for decades just doing that. And so I have that in my DNA. I am resourced. Like, they gave me an endless resource of power just in the way that they loved me. And then they keep showing up to do it. So there's that. There's leaning on them. There's leaning on the amazing, beautiful friends I've made. And then I look like a crazy person, but I go on walks with my little 9-year-old self all the time. And I'm like talking to her, and what are you feeling right now? Oh, I see, you're a little scared about money. Okay, that makes sense. You know, like, truly, I do the work. I do the work. I never, ever ask any of you to do anything I'm not doing myself. So I am in dialogue with my little self, and I am accountable to my higher self, because I wrote a book about her. So I have to listen. Like, I have to find a way to do this method, to pull in what is she saying right now, and then I have to choose what she's saying, even when it terrifies me to publish a book or to sit on a stage or whatever it might be. Like, I have chosen that I am going to pick the path that she's guiding me down from that moment on that kitchen floor until today. I never stopped listening. So that's all of those ways.
Question over here, and stand up. We love standing up.
Do you have any tools that, meaning like, do you use crystals, do you use tea, or do you just connect? Do you use any kind of tools? And if you do you believe that those tools create the power, or do you just use them as a way to transmit?
We humans make meaning. So when I believe in something, it becomes a tool. When we collectively believe in something, it also becomes a tool. So I do believe in the healing energy of crystals. I do receive that wisdom, but I have to believe it for it to work for me. And I would say that to all of you. Like, if you're, sometimes I get clients that show up that have intellectualized spirituality or divinity. And so it's coming out of their mouths because they've read all the books and Pema Chodron and they know all the, but it's not embodied. And so what I always say is, like, you have to come to your own belief system. You have to believe in it, as Mrs. Penn said, for it to be true. So I do, but some of the tools I use is like my grandma had this turquoise ring, and I apologized to her because it didn't match my outfit, so I didn't wear it. But I wear it all the time, and I rub that ring all the time because that's my connection to her. But as far as the way that I channel, which is what I think you're asking, I am reading what's across from me. I'm a very relational being. So I am reading what is coming in with you. And that is a whole system of energy. It is your past, it is your little selves, it is seeing your higher self, it is your guides, it's all of that. But I don't need a label for it. I'm just literally receiving you and holding up a mirror. And I'll say this, I want to say this to you all about intuition. You have to say it out loud. Because when you say it out loud and you see the other person being like, oh, how did you know? That's your evidence. Your brain needs evidence that it's real. We've been conditioned to not trust our intuition for thousands of years. So the conditioning is there to tell you you're wrong. The way that your brain will build a neural pathway to tell you intuition is a data point is if you say it, like in our session, this is what I'm seeing, and Jennifer being like, that's what I'm seeing. How are you seeing what I'm seeing? That's information for my brain to say, that's accurate, and it continues to build trust in that intuitive sense. I gave you a lot more than what you asked for. Okay.
Another question.
How do you handle it when you function this way and you're working with somebody close to you, let's say, that doesn't function that way, more 3D, and you're all like 50D?
Do you mean in a working scenario or in a relational scenario?
Any scenario that is relational. Like, how do you speak when you're getting information that you feel strongly that you know is your higher self, and another person doesn't have that kind of...
I love that question because I'm smiling that my family's sitting here being like, she doesn't filter it, she just says it. But I have learned to really slow down and ask myself, what can they receive right now from me? And I've learned to do it through questions. What do you sense about this? Like, what I want more than anything is for you to not need me to feel your higher self. I want you to feel your higher self. So I'll ask you questions that I know your higher self will answer, and then I'll have you tell me, and then I'll point out how that was your inner wisdom. Because we're all intuitive. So I think I've learned as I've aged, and I don't have the need for the validation of others, to just let people figure it out on their own, but to nudge and guide by asking questions that illuminates, oh, I did know that. Like, I actually do know that. I do get feelings about things that are happening to people I love. And sometimes if I really feel like I need to tell them, I'll just say, do I have permission to tell you something? And they'll sometimes say no, or they'll sometimes say yes. But I think the answer to your question is I just exist this way, and I believe that you also have it in you. And in that belief, I'm hoping that I cultivate it.
One last question before we go to close and book signing. It's so exciting. I'm so excited. Yes.
Hi, I'm Ashkan.
Hi, Ashkan.
So I think when you think about these relationships and finding higher self in the people around you, my brain immediately goes to working relationships or romantic relationships, but I'm a new dad.
Aww.
And I'm curious for your thoughts and maybe wisdom to share about what I should be trying to tune into with my child as she's growing up.
I mean, I will tell you, I think parental intuition is such a force that it's a really good testing ground. I love that you asked this question because there's things you just know, right? Like, you know when she needs something. You know when she's going to be awake in her room. Like, you know it. So I don't think you have to do anything more than that, but I would say use that as evidence that you're intuitive in other areas of your life. Like, that was what it was for me. It's like, oh, if I'm intuitive with these clients, then I must be, then that gift must exist. You didn't ask this, I do want to say this about raising children. The way I believe about our 4 children is that they have the wisdom to know what to do next. So rather than tell them, don't tell on me, but rather than tell them, I try to ask them, and I say to them, I really trust you. What do you know? What do you believe? And I think it's cultivating in them this knowing that they have this wisdom, And they don't need me or TJ to tell them, but that we're just here to remind them that they know. Or when they come home, when like they come home with something and show me something, and rather than always be like, I'm proud of you, I'd say, are you proud of yourself? Because I want you to learn to be internally validated. I want you to learn to trust that wisdom inside.
Good question. So this is the conclusion, but I wanted to ask you anything at all you want to say in the closing. And
Yeah, I want you to trust that your higher self brought you here today. And I want you to trust that even if there's a cynic in there telling you it can't be real, it's not true, it doesn't work, it's easier to do it that way. I want you to know that you know what I'm talking about. I see it. When I'm talking to you, there's recognition. Follow that recognition. That is your higher self saying, it's me she's talking about. Like, it's a reunion, it's a dance. Say yes to that invitation. Whatever you're sensing in yourself right now, say yes and keep listening and keep cultivating the relationship.